Oh boy, it's been a while since I've done one of these. Ever since I started the Advanced Wars Deathless runs, I knew I had to save the biggest challenge to the end, and at long last, that challenge is finally here. The first Advanced Wars game came to the West in 2001, and out of all the games in the franchise, I think it's the hardest by far, especially if you play the Advanced campaign, which consequently is exactly what I'm doing for this challenge. Today, I'm going to try and defeat the original Advanced Wars game without losing units. The rules are simple. After each mission, I have to bring up the status screen to prove that I have taken 0 losses. Rankings don't matter. How I win a mission don't matter. And as always, I am allowed to join 2 damaged units together, as this is not treated as a loss by the game. But this is going to be easier said than done. The hard campaign of Advanced Wars 1 is brutal. The AI often outnumber your forces 3-1, and there are some COs who are just not fun to face with this rule set in mind. The campaign of Advanced Wars 1 is also somewhat linear, meaning I don't have the luxury of skipping missions like I could in Advanced Wars 2, but I do have some choice of where I go, as there are multiple paths you can take through the campaign. But because I am absolutely insane, I have decided to take the most difficult route of them all, the Eagle route. Yes, I am going to attempt Rivals Deathless. At the time of recording this, I actually don't know if this is possible to do or not. It may be that I end up in the final mission to discover that it's simply not possible, and at that point I can't simply go back. I have to do the whole thing over again. That being said, I do have a few things working in my favor. The AI of Advanced Wars 1 is perhaps the dumbest it has ever been. It hates APCs with a burning fury, and will always target them above anything else. This is something that I both can and have to manipulate to my advantage in order to get through some of these missions. There are a few which I think might just not be possible, but we will just have to see. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, enough introduction. Today I ask the following question. Can you defeat the Advanced campaign of Advanced Wars 1 without losing a single unit? Let's find out. In most games, even on the hardest difficulty, the first mission is usually a breather, designed to give you a smooth entry into the campaign to come. But this is not the case with Advanced Wars 1. The first mission of the Advanced campaign is here to show you that if you accidentally walked into this mode unprepared, you will quickly be shown the ropes. To show you just how insane this power gap is, I booted up this map on Advanced Wars by Web to show you the difference in unit value. Your army has a starting value of 40,000 funds. Olaf's army has a value of 130,000. Olaf not only has the numerical and value advantage, but he also has superior tech, as he starts with 3 medium tanks, while you have none. This means that you have to rely entirely on your artillery units to take them down. Luckily for you, some of Olaf's units are stationary, meaning you won't have to deal with the full force of his army all at once. But even with a stupid AI, it's still no cakewalk. In this mission, you play as Andy. In Advanced Wars 1, he's pretty bad. He has no day-to-day abilities, and his power is just a simple 2 HP global repair, which sounds good in a Deathless run, but it really isn't as useful as you might think. Repairs won't prevent your units from being killed at full health, which is what a big part of this challenge is all about preventing. Luckily for us, our opponent on this map is another fairly mid-tier CO in Olaf. His power changes the weather to snow for 1 day, which is annoying but seldom very scary. As long as you don't get your units caught out in the open when it hits, you should be fine. To tackle this mission, I decide to exploit the AI's stupidity. Olaf's units will move towards mine at maximum speed, even his indirects, which allows me to trap an artillery in the only spot leading into my base. As long as that artillery is there, his other units will bunch up behind it, especially if I give it something to shoot at, which I do from my HQ. This allows me to bottleneck a majority of Olaf's army with a single recon. As Olaf's first blizzard comes in, it doesn't really do anything as I'm busy playing defense, but after I activate my first hyper repair, I go a little overboard on the artillery and send it into repair mode. Repair mode is what a unit goes into once it reaches a certain level of HP. This can vary depending on the AI, but in this case I think it's either 2 or 3 HP. When a unit goes into repair mode, it stops attacking and retreats back to the nearest property, where it will stay until appropriately healed. But this also means that Olaf's medium tank has free reign to come cruising into my HQ. Luckily, he puts it on a road, which means I can blast it with my artillery for some massive damage. And once it's low enough, it's a simple task to clean it up with my other units. Once the charging medium tank is dealt with, I just have some infantry and mechs to mop up, which is not very difficult to do. At this point, I've dealt with all of Olaf's moving forces, leaving only his stationary ones left, and it's actually pretty simple to clean them up. All I have to do is bait his medium tanks into range of both my artillery to kill them off quickly. It's slow going, but it's not hard. I reach his HQ on day 23, and after quickly showing off that I've suffered no losses, I capture it to claim my first victory. Unlike the other challenge runs, you will not be seeing a lot of S ranks in this one. To give you an example of how hard it is to get, you need to complete this mission in 5 days to get that S rank. Anyway, let's continue. Chapter 2 sees us going face to face with a CO that's going to be a big pain in the butt in this challenge, Grits. In Advanced Wars 1, he's actually a lot weaker than in the other games, as his indirects only get +1 range and no firepower increase, and the rest of his army, infantry included, gets -20% firepower. But make no mistake, Grits' missions in the Advanced Wars 1 hard campaign are some of the most brutal ones you'll ever see. Just look at Grits' insane starting army. Luckily, not all of these units will charge at you right away, but it's still going to be a struggle, as in the advanced campaign, you start off with a measly 2 infantry. Luckily, we have bases and Grit does not, meaning we just have to outlast him. But this is easier said than done. The most common strategy on this map is to do a double base skip right away, which allows you to deploy a medium tank on day 2. This gives you a response to Grit's incoming vehicles, including his medium tank, which will charge at you. The start of this mission actually isn't too bad. I'm able to just hold my ground around my starting bases, as Grit's quite defensive with his indirects, refusing to go anywhere near me. However, Grit's snipe attack is on steroids in Advanced Wars 1. It gives his indirects an insane +65% firepower and +2 range, turning his artillery and rockets into intercontinental ballistic missiles. As soon as Grit's first snipe attack comes online, I get absolutely pummeled and suffer my very first defeat. And my consecutive attempts fare no better. It goes the same every single time. I'm able to hold off Grit's initial attack with no problems, but as soon as snipe attack is ready, I always seem to lose at least 1 unit. And this happens again, and again, and again. I actually lose count of how many times I fail this mission. I always knew that the Grit missions would be bad when I started this challenge, but I didn't realize just how bad they were gonna get. Grit simply has too many starting indirects on this map, and it's just so easy to miscalculate when all of them gets a combined +3 range bonus during his power. Finally, after multiple retries, I am able to get a single snipe attack where Grit is unable to kill one of my units. And at this point, I think the mission should be won. Grit is unable to produce any units, and I have pretty much all the time in the world to build up a huge army. But here's the problem. Look at how many indirects Grits has clumped up together. 2 rockets and 2 artillery. It doesn't matter how much money I have available, my medium tanks can only take 2 hits, maybe 3 if my power is up and they are on defensive terrain. I think of ways to approach this squad of units, but it just doesn't seem feasible to me. So I get another idea. I decide to spam mechs. A lot of mechs. You see, mechs are the only units that can cross the northern river and into the eastern mountain range, which allows me a separate route into Grit's base. But there is a problem. He's got a rocket and a medium tank near his HQ, so I have to deal with at least one of them before I can move my mechs in. So I decide to pull off some Russian military tactics and just send my units in as meat shields until the enemy runs out of ammo. This works, as Grit has to pull his rocket back for repair, and I noticed something very interesting. It seems like the AI won't use its HQ to refuel its units, as Grit moves his rockets down south to the city to get it resupplied instead. This allows me just enough time to dart my mechs towards his HQ, and since Grit's medium tank is unable to one-shot them with its -20% firepower penalty, I am at long last able to, on day 37, with 0 losses, to capture his HQ and claim my victory. This mission turned out to be an absolute nightmare, and we're only on the 2nd one. What have I gotten myself into? The Advanced Wars 1 campaign is full of COs you really don't want to go up against in a Deathless challenge. Grit was bad, but he's nothing compared to the menace that is Eagle. You'll be seeing this guy a lot in this video, especially considering I'm planning to unlock rivals. Eagle is an air unit specialist whose planes and copters deal 15% extra damage and have 10% extra defense. They also use 2 less fuel per day, and his naval units have minus 20% firepower. But Eagle's day-to-day abilities is not what makes him such a scaring foe to face. His power, Lightning Strike, lets all of his non-infantry units move twice, albeit with a penalty of them dealing 20% less damage and losing 30% defense. But this power is just so incredibly brutal to go up against in a Deathless run. It is just so incredibly hard to account for a double turn, and it very quickly leads to you losing a unit. Mission 3, Air Ace, is far from the most difficult Eagle mission in the campaign. The strategy to win this mission is to normally just go for a quick HQ cap, but this is not an option in this challenge, as it's just too easy to lose a stray unit to one of Eagle's many air units. Instead, I decide to hunker down most of my units around my HQ and build a wall of anti-air. This is easier said than done, however, as Eagle's bombers will one-shot most units that are not on cities, including my anti-air, so the walls need to be very cleverly made. The trick to winning this mission is to ignore Eagle's fighters. You don't really need to kill them, as they're worth too much power charge, and as long as you wall in your transport and battlecopter, they can't really do anything. In fact, they're actually quite helpful to have around, since they can end up blocking Eagle's other units from reaching yours. By very carefully managing Eagle's power meter, I'm able to deal with most of his air units before his lightning strike comes in, but the ones he has left still manages to score a kill on me. It takes me around 5 to 6 attempts to get a perfect wall going, and even then, I have to use my APC in a very clever way, baiting Eagle's last remaining battlecopter into splitting its attacks between that and one of my other units. Once I do that, however, I'm able to mop up Eagle's remaining air fleet, and at this point, the rest of the mission is laughably easy. All I need to do to win is to transport a single mech to his HQ, bait in Eagle's last remaining stationary bomber, and then use my T-copter to block Eagle's tank guarding his HQ. And just like that, on day 10, with 0 losses, I finish my capture to score a victory. This was a relatively easy Eagle mission, all things considered. The rest will be a lot harder. Up next, we come to our first route splits. We have the choice between selecting Andy or Max. This may not seem like a big deal, but this choice will actually dictate one of the COs we get to use in the final battle against Sturm. If we select Max for this mission, we will get to use Grit on the left side, commanding the Blue Moon Army. For a Deathless run, this is very ideal, as Grit has the ability to set up a wall of rockets, which eventually becomes a win condition, so that's the mission I'm choosing. Mission 4, Max Strikes, is a simple pre-deployed battle against Olaf featuring some naval units. Normally, this army would be pretty scary to face head-on, but we get to play as one of the most broken COs of all time, Max. In Advanced Wars 1, Max's direct combat units gain an insane plus 50% increase to firepower. Yes, you heard that right, plus 50%. I don't know what the Advanced Wars 1 devs were smoking when they designed this CO. Just to put it in perspective how stupidly overpowered this is, Advanced Wars 2 Max had his day-to-day firepower more than halved, down to 20%, and he's still considered a top-tier CO in that game. Max's overwhelming firepower in this game turns so many of the missions you get to play as him into complete jokes, as he just straight up one-shots things. And if that wasn't bad enough, his CO power makes him even more ridiculous. Due to the way stacking bonuses works in Advanced Wars 1, Max Force sets the firepower of all direct combat units up to plus 87%, which lets you see some of the most insane damage numbers ever. In addition to this, they also get +1 bonus movement, allowing them to reach their targets easier. For some strange reason, this bonus movement also applies to his transport units in this game, probably because they are classified as direct vehicles in the game's code. This was actually corrected in the later games. So, you may ask yourself, how does Advanced Wars 1 balance out Max's insane firepower? It gives his indirects -1 range, -10% firepower and defense, which actually doesn't end up mattering most of the time, since if you position them well, you can still utilize them to great effect. While this mission is normally incredibly easy, even in the advanced campaign, I do have to play a little bit carefully, as it's very easy for one of my units to get sniped by one of Olaf's many battleships. However, as soon as I play a little more defensively, it's not hard to bait Olaf's troops into range of my deadly vehicles. Despite the fact that Max's artillery can only shoot on units 2 spaces away from them, they can still be utilized due to the AI being incredibly predictable. Olaf's battleships are scary, but our 2 submarines are easily able to take them down as he lacks any cruisers. This mission does get a little scary after Olaf's first blizzard, as I'm faced with a lot of units clumped up together, which are capable of taking out one of my units. But I decide to bring my submarines up north and unsubmerge them in range of Olaf's artillery, making it shoot on them instead of moving along with his other units. This splits up his forces, and combined with a well-timed max force, it allows me to easily wipe Olaf's troops off the map. And even though I previously transported an infantry with my lander to cap his HQ, it doesn't really matter as I'm able to rout him anyway. On day 8, with 0 losses, I order my tank to take out Olaf's last remaining mech to score a victory. If only all future missions would be this easy. Mission 5, Sniper, is our very first forte into Fog of War, and of course it's against Grit, who's hidden tons of indirects in every forests. However, Grit's defenses have a fatal flaw. He doesn't have a lot of anti-air units. He's got a single missile situated on the northern property in the center, and another one on the island to the northeast, along with 2 anti-air. If we take out his missiles, it's quite easy to transport an infantry unit to his HQ, so that's what I'm going for. The rest of my army will simply hunker down around my HQ and wait for Grit's vehicles to come closer. I start by sending my battlecopter to scout out Grit's initial missile, and drop a mech in the mountains with my T-copter to finish it off. This draws the attention of Grit's tanks, but since they're so weak, they're unable to kill my T-copters in 2 hits like most other normal COs can, and instead takes 3, which buys me a lot of time. After killing the initial missile and evacuating my mech back to my HQ, I move my copter onto the island where a single stationary missile awaits me. Due to its minimum range, it's peanuts to kill it off, and I also destroyed the rocket there just for good measure. With both missiles destroyed and both of Grit's anti-air heading towards my base, my T-copter is now safe to dart around the north. Grit pops his first snipe attack, but he doesn't have any indirects in range of my units, so nothing happens. As for his other vehicles, they race towards my base, and I peck them off using my nerfed indirects and pop a max force for good measure to wipe out his last artillery. The extra range also allows my battlecopter to reach the rocket guarding his HQ, and at this point the rest is very easy. On day 9, with 0 losses, I capture Grit's HQ to earn myself another victory. Mission 6, Blizzard Battle, is one of those maps that I remember giving me a lot of trouble when I was playing the advanced campaign for the first time as a teenager. Here we go up against Olaf in a capture battle. First one to get 12 properties wins. But of course, in standard campaign fashion, Olaf starts with way more properties and a much bigger army. By default, if you let him get 2 properties on your side of the river, it's an instant game over. But there is a little trick you can pull off to buy yourself some crucial time. By moving a mech with an APC over the southern bridge and using said APC to shield your capturing mech, you can snag one of Olaf's properties early on and hold it for the rest of the match. This is important as it gives you some time to deal with Olaf's northern push, which is quite scary. He attacks early on with 2 mechs, an artillery, a rocket, and a tank, which by itself isn't that scary, but when I can't lose any units, I have to be extremely careful with how I position my army. The medium tank Olaf has on the bridge is just stationary, so it won't attack unless I aggro it. But Olaf always positions his rocket just within his range, meaning that if I want to take it out, I have to engage that medium tank at some point, and it's very hard to deal with that, plus all the other stuff he's sending. If you don't target his mechs, Olaf will eventually capture some of your properties and you will lose the battle, and this sneaks up on you very quickly. It's actually a very tough map, and I reset multiple times. Blizzard always seems to come in at the worst possible moment, just when I need to pull off a low HP unit to safety or interrupt one of Olaf's captures. But luckily, Max is still as broken as ever, and even when Olaf's medium tank gets the first strike against mine, I can still win the engagement by popping Max Force afterwards. Eventually, I find a good opener that allows me to do just enough damage to Olaf's mechs to delay his captures, while also being able to hold on to the city in the south due to Olaf bunching up most of his army, since the AI is mentally challenged in this game. And eventually, I'm able to eliminate Olaf's units in the north, and on day 11, with 0 losses, I capture my 12th property to claim my victory. Capture battles are actually a lot of fun, and I wish the campaign had more of them. Mission 7, History Lesson, is another Grit Fog of War pre-deployed battle, and this is a map you will only get if you go down the Grit route in the campaign. You have to play as Max here, but that's fine, as I select him for every mission anyway. If you're curious about what kind of units Grit has on this map, he starts off with a small force attack in your island, and he also has 1 sub, a single cruiser, and a battleship protecting his HQ. His island is covered in indirect units and tanks, however, so it's quite hard to take it. But believe it or not, this mission isn't actually all that difficult. You just need to take your time, as you don't have a day limit to win. Or actually, that's not quite true. You do sort of have a day limit. You have no APCs available in this mission, which means your subs will run out of fuel eventually, so you need to be careful and monitor them when they are dived, as they will expend 5 fuel per day. Luckily, there is a way to extend their lifespan, which I will show you later. I start off this map by dealing with Grit's initial amphibious assaults. I lure his sub in with one of my landers, and then I destroy it not with my cruiser, as that's likely to get it picked off by one of his rockets, but instead my other dived subs. This is intentional, as I want to lure in his cruiser and damage one of them. This will be relevant later. Before Grit gets his first snipe attack, I pull all of my units back and hide them in forests and reefs, resulting in him not having any targets to shoot at. Then I mop up his remaining units on the island and send my 2 dived subs towards his battleship and pop a max force to instantly destroy it. Then I combine my 2 subs together to join their fuel reserves before unsubmerging them. This gives me the remaining fuel I need to finish the mission, but just barely. Subs use 2 fuel per turn when not dived instead of 5, but with only 14 fuel left after the next turn, that means I have 8 turns to take his HQ before they sink, which is less than I feel comfortable with. Once I land on Grit's island, his tanks come out to meet me, and I have to be careful to not give him too much power, as that enables him to snipe attack, which will kill one of my units. So I just block off his tanks instead and start capturing his HQ. And on day 13, with no losses, I finish the cap to earn my victory. This will be the last Grit mission for a while, as the Blue Moon arc is basically concluded, but the difficult part of the campaign is just about to begin. At long last, we are joined by another playable CO in Sami, and while picking her is not needed, I do it anyway just for fun. Mission 8, Sami's debut, is another pre-deployed battle against Eagle, this time in Fog of War, and this is truly when the advanced campaign is starting to show you its middle finger. Eagle has 6 bombers, 2 fighters, 5 battlecopters, 3 medium tanks in addition to infantry and regular tanks. This combined with his lightning strike makes this mission seem almost impossible to do deathless, at least if you play it normally. But believe it or not, there actually is a strategy you can pull off that completely trivializes this map. But first, let's talk about our new CO, Sami. She's the 3rd and final playable CO you have access to in the campaign, and she is an infantry specialist. Her day-to-day is pretty insane in the first game, with her infantry having 20% extra firepower and 10% extra defense. They also capture 50% faster. Her transports enjoy a passive +1 bonus to movement, but her other indirect units suffer -10% firepower. Sami's double time sets her infantry firepower up to 54% and their defense up to 28%. It's a bit wonky, but that's that's just how Advanced Wars works with its passive bonuses. Double Time also gives infantry +1 bonus to move and allows them to cross any terrain without any extra cost, meaning Sami's infantry can dart across mountains in this game. This is a power that is in the game's code in Advanced Wars 2, but it was removed, probably because they thought it was a bit too OP. Sami is an absolutely amazing CO when you are gunning for S ranks, as there are some maps in the Advanced campaign that literally only she can complete in time. In a Deathless challenge, on the other hand, Sami isn't all that viable. But in order to unlock rivals, I have to pick her for every single Eagle missions, with the exception of this one. So in reality, I didn't really need to pick her here, but I did it anyway because my strategy is so dumb it doesn't matter who I pick. The first thing I do is pull all my forces back to my HQ and hide as many of my vehicles in forests as possible to protect them from Eagle's bombers. It takes me a few tries to get my opener right, but I eventually set my units up in such a way that Eagle only has a handful of weakened air units left when his lightning strike is ready, and he uses them all to attack my APC on my HQ. And because they're already weakened and he gets reduced firepower, it survives. After this initial attack, Eagle's remaining units are all stationary, meaning they won't move until I get within their range. But since Eagle also lacks airports and APCs, that means his air units are on a timer. Now, you may think that Eagle's special day-to-day fuel cost reduction was made to combat exactly this kind of cheese, and at least for his battlecopters, this is true, as they actually consume 0 fuel per day and can stay up in the air indefinitely as long as they don't move. However, fighters and bombers consume 5 fuel per day, meaning that even with Eagle's -2 cost, they still end up burning 3 fuel per day. And while their fuel reserves are enormous at 99, they will still run out at some point. And since I have an APC capable of refueling my own aircraft, that means I can just press and turn until day 35, at which point all of Eagle's remaining fighters and bombers will crash. That means that the only units he has left are medium tanks and battlecopters. So I send my fighter to mop up his northern copters, while one of my T-copters carries a single infantry all the way to his HQ, where a medium tank stands guard. I drop off the infantry within 4 spaces of said HQ, using the mountain as a shield, which forces the tank to move off the HQ to attack my T-copter, and after popping double time, my infantry is capable of darting over the mountain and start the capture. And because of Sami's increased defense and capture speed, the medium tank is actually unable to interrupt the cap. So on day 42, with no units lost, I capture the HQ to claim my victory. And despite this incredibly slow strategy, I still somehow managed to get a B rank. At long last, it is time for the Kanbei saga, featuring 3 maps against one of the strongest COs in Advanced Wars, the modern samurai himself. While he's not as broken as his Advanced Wars 2 iteration, Advanced Wars 1 Kanbei is still a force to be reckoned with, getting 20% increased firepower and defense for all of his units at the cost of them being 20% more expensive. His CO power, Morale Boost, is a very slow to charge power that sets his firepower up to 40% and his defense to 30%, which isn't a big boost, but it does make his already scary units a lot more troublesome. For this mission, I actually pick Andy, as he's pretty good on defense maps, and because indirects are pretty important here. You can beat this mission easily as Max as well, as his indirects actually aren't that bad as long as you set them up properly, but I just wanted some variety. I start by sending my vehicles out to damage Kanbei's indirects, who have somehow ended up in front of the rest of his army, and then pull everything back to the choke point in the mountains. The reason I actually favor Andy over Max on this map is because Kanbei's tanks will actually attack your medium tanks, since the AI considers it a cost-effective trade, whereas with Max, he will not do this since the counterattack damage is too high. This allows me to bottleneck his army and take pot shots at them with my indirects, and for the first time, Hyper Upgrade actually turns out to be insanely good. Just look at how much HP it restores. When Kanbei activates his first morale boost, it doesn't end up doing anything, as none of his units are able to really attack. Doing the mission this way actually makes it very easy, and while I do end up having to reset once after stupidly placing my mechs in range of one of his tanks, I steamroll it on my second try with little difficulty and 0 losses. I'm even able to beat it in under 8 days, which is a prerequisite for unlocking the Sonja guidance. Up next, we have the second map in the Kanbei trilogy, Mission 10, Mighty Kanbei. This map sees you holding out against a superior force, but the joke here is that he hasn't secured any bases, so you really only have to outlast him. I select Sami for this mission since I have a theory that my regular S-rank strategy will work just fine in a deathless one. I build an APC on the first day and start transporting my infantry towards Kanbei's unguarded HQ. I then bottleneck the rest of his army on the eastern bridge, move my rockets into position to zone out his, and then I load off my infantry and pop a double time to reach it on day 5, which allows me to capture it with 0 losses on day 6, which is actually enough to earn my very first S rank in this challenge so far. Pretty easy. Alright, the two first were laughably easy. Now comes the mission you've probably all been waiting for. The dreaded Kanbei's Error. This map is infamous for soft-locking people during their first playthrough of the Advanced campaign. I almost think the developers made it as a cruel joke. Not only is this mission fog of war, but if you don't play it perfectly, Kanbei will just win on day 6 as it is a capture battle, and he can get pretty much all the properties he needs without even entering your territory. Beating this mission is hard enough. Doing it deathless is something else entirely. However, once you realize how to beat this map, it actually isn't as insane as you might think. The win condition is to try and prevent Kanbei from getting this city, as it's the last one he needs to get 15 properties. You can do this by luring his stationary anti-air to move on top of it, as it will never move away as long as it doesn't have another target to shoot at, effectively blocking the infantry from ever getting the city. The only unit you can use to lure in an anti-air that will survive a hit from it is your fighter, so you will need to start moving that towards this location as early as day 4. Until then, it is just a matter of surviving, and because of the fog, it really just comes down to dumb luck. Your infantry units can barely survive a Kanbei bomber on bases with 1 HP remaining, but your best bet is to simply make Kanbei's units get in each other's way. His fighters tend to move first, and they'll try to reach your copter units, so if you nestle them behind your infantry, the fighters just usually end up taking up space, preventing Kanbei's bombers from reaching you. Max's missiles, while they are nerfed, still inflicts considerable damage to Kanbei's air units, so it's essential that you use it well. Kanbei's first morale boost is the biggest challenge of this map. You have to ensure that Kanbei won't get to attack you with a lot of his units, and I fail multiple times trying to set up a good formation, and after about 10 or so tries, I finally get an attempt where none of my units die. At this point, I start sending my fighter towards the island to lure out the anti-air, and once it attacks, I have now prevented Kanbei from winning unless he can take any of the other properties on my islands, which isn't hard to prevent. At this point, I just have to destroy his transports, and then I capture the central airport, which I can use to deploy a bomber to take down the anti-air. Since I've cleared the 2 prior Kanbei missions rather quickly, I decide to wait all the way until day 13 to capture the final property, as 12 days is the requirement to unlock the Sonja guidance, and I have absolutely 0 interest in doing those. And so, with 0 losses, I cap my final property to earn myself a, what? That dialogue is not supposed to play. Wait a minute, excuse me? I unlocked the Sonja missions anyway? But every single Advanced Wars wiki tells me that the requirement is 12 days, so how come I unlocked this mission on day 13? Something is fishy here. I actually have a theory as to why this happens, and I think I can even prove it. I think 8, 10, and 12 days are not the individual time requirements, but rather the combined ones. I think you actually have to clear the Kanbei missions with a combined turn count of under 30 days, with 8, 10, and 12 turns being the maximum individual turn counts for each mission. If my theory is correct, I should be able to spend up to 16 days on Kanbei's Error and still unlock the Sonja guidance. And after quickly replaying the mission, my theory turns out to be correct. Just to prove it, I make sure to beat it in 17 days, and look at that, I do not get the unique dialogue. So yeah, it turns out that I have discovered an error that every single Wars wiki has gotten wrong for over 20 years. Call it Kanbei's Error, if you will. So yeah, it's kinda cool that we gotten this sorted out now, but this means I have now unlocked the Sonja missions, which wasn't something I was gonna try deathless, as I plan on getting Eagle for the final map, not Kanbei. But you know what? It's extra content. Let's freaking do it. So yeah, at long last it is time for the Sonja saga. Similar to with Kanbei, we have to face 3 maps of increasing difficulty, starting with Mission 12, Divide and Conquer. This map, quickly summarized, is Sonja bullies you ruthlessly with what feels like a grid mission. You play as Max in Fog of War and there's indirects everywhere. There's only really one way to tackle this mission deathless, and that is simply to memorize where Sonja's artillery and rockets are. Speaking of Sonja, she is absolutely terrible in this game. She hides her own unit's HP, though that doesn't really matter, and she gets a +1 passive bonus to vision in Fog of War, which also doesn't matter since the AI cheats in Fog. And on top of that, her units can get up to 20% bad luck, which really cripples her damage output. Her CO power, Enhanced Vision, is very quick to charge and gives her units +2 extra vision for a total of 3, and allows her to see through woods and reefs, which is very annoying. I think it's pretty funny that the worst CO in this game by far also has some of the most brutal missions in the campaign, to the point where they felt they needed to gate these maps behind a Gaiden requirement. But I also think Sonja being so terrible is what made them feel justified in creating some of these maps. Sonja may not be able to kill you with a broken day-to-day or a super strong power, but she can kill you through the devs just designing her maps to be insanely difficult. Early on, this mission pulls you into a bit of a trap, as Sonja has 2 rockets very close to your starting position, but killing them both is exactly enough to charge her CO power, which very easily allows her to take out one of your units, which forces a reset. Right off the bat, I just have to commend the devs for this ingenious design decision. Sonja placing 2 rockets in range of the player's starting army is such a perfect example of a lesson she would want to impart to Max in this battle. If you take the obvious bait, you will be punished. I found that a much easier way to tackle this mission is to kill 1 rocket and leave the other damaged, since the AI refuses to activate its power in Advanced Wars 1 unless they start at full gauge. So this way, I don't have to deal with her power until turn 2, which makes it much more manageable. After I deal with her initial charging tanks, the rest of the mission becomes rather easy, as I can simply maneuver around her indirects, and all I need to do is take out her infantry with my recon so they don't capture my HQ, and then bring my medium tank up to her HQ. I almost mess up towards the end, as Sonja's medium tank attacks my own tank, bringing it down to 1 HP, and I probably just survived due to her bad luck. And on day 11, with no losses, I once again claim my victory. First Sonja mission down, 2 more to go. Mission 13, Sami Marches On, is where things start to get really rough. This map sees us going up against Sonja in a capture battle as Sami, and while that may sound great, it's far from it. The first player to get 16 properties win this map, but this is, in my opinion, one of the trickier missions in the campaign. Simply defeating this normally is already hard enough. Doing it deathless is a completely different ballgame. This is a naval battle without air units, so you're forced to rely on landers to move your units around, and Sami is nice for this as she gets extra movement on them. But Sonja has a huge starting army, including battleships, cruisers, and submarines. She also has a medium tank and a rocket on the central island, and a big force heading for the southern one. Your success in this mission depends on how well you're able to split your attention between the 2 islands. I start my turn by dropping a mech inside an APC and a rocket on the island to the north, so I can shoot on Sonja's rocket on the second turn. And I also use my battleship to soften up her medium tank so it's easier to deal with later. Then I send another lander down with a medium tank and a mech to secure the southern base. I know I won't be able to hold this island, but it is important that I take the base anyway. You'll see why in a bit. The first challenge of this mission is to deal with Sonja's submarine and cruiser. I need to set up my naval units in such a way that her sub can't reach mine, which allows me to take it out. After this, I can set up a perimeter where my naval units control the central waters. But this is just the beginning of an incredibly tough map. I quickly have to evacuate the southern island after capturing the base, as Sonja is charging in with medium tanks, rockets, and artillery. But since the base is under my control now, I have vision on it, which means I'll be able to see whenever she's trying to cap it. And by keeping a battleship within its range, I am at the very least able to interrupt the cap should it ever happen. This is why it's so important to take this base. I clear the northern island easily enough and take over all the properties on it, including the harbor and base. But even with all of them, I still need 2 more, while Sonja only needs a single one. This makes the battle incredibly tricky because I now have to prevent her from getting any properties on that island. And due to the expensive naval units, Sonja gets her CO power literally every other turn, which gives me a small heart attack every time I see her rockets targeting my naval units. I reset countless times. It is just so easy for Sonja to pick off a unit from fog with one of her indirects, and I can safely say that this map is one of the hardest yet. I can't turtle it because of the capture victory, which forces me to go on the offense, but Sonja has a million landers, and she dumps vehicles onto my northern island constantly, forcing me to deal with it, and her economy is also good enough for her to keep replenishing her cruisers and subs, forcing me to deal with those as well. In order to prevent Sonja from getting one of the southern properties, I have to scout out the island and use my battleships to fire on her infantry constantly. And to top it all off, one of my battleships is rapidly running out of ammo, and it's not in range of an APC. I am starting to run out of hope that this map is even doable. However, after many resets, I am finally able to come up with a strategy that lets me put a dived sub on the harbor, which at least prevents Sonja from getting it as long as she can't get a cruiser in range. And then slowly but surely, I start to accumulate more and more battleships which are able to start zoning Sonja's units away from her island. And finally, after 2 hours of resetting, on day 17, with 0 losses, I capture my final property to score my win. That was absolutely horrible. Mission 14, Sonja's Goal, is the last of the 3 Sonja guidance, and a pretty tricky one if you play it normally. There's no gimmicks with this one, just a basic pre-deployed battle in the fog with both naval and air units. I quickly find out that my usual strategy on this map doesn't work at all, as Sonja will just pop her enhanced vision and find one of my units hidden in the reefs and woods and take it out. So instead I just opt to go for the boring strat. Since it's just a regular router capture HQ mission, there's nothing really pushing me forward except for a good ranking, which I don't care about in this challenge. So for this reason, I can just hunker all my units down around my starting position and wait for Sonja's units to charge at me. She does start with a pretty big army on this map, but only about half of her units are actually mobile. The rest remain stationary until you get within their range. So if you just take your time and turtle, you effectively only have to deal with half of her army. After about 10 to 12 days of turtling, Sonja only has infantry units moving around the map, and I can take my time picking off her stationary rockets in the woods as they are sitting ducks whenever her CO power is not ready. I decide to load my transport and bodicopter into my cruiser for protection since I know Sonja has a stationary fighter near her HQ, and using said cruiser I take down that fighter and then use my battleship and rocket to deal with her last remaining medium tank. And after 21 long days, I am, with no losses, able to capture her HQ to claim my victory. Up next is a crucial route split. For this next map, I have to select Sami if I want to unlock rivals, and this also happens to be one of the most brutal missions in the campaign. Mission 15, Captain Drake, is an absolute brain twister of a map. It's another naval-oriented capture battle in the fog, similar to the Sonja mission, but this time around we're up against an actual naval specialist in Drake. For some weird reason, it states in his dossier that his naval units have improved firepower, but this is actually a lie. Instead, they all have +1 passive move, as well as gaining 2 extra terrain stars in battle. Fun fact, placing a Drake naval unit on a harbor is the only time in the game you will see the incredibly rare graphic of 5 terrain stars. In addition to having really good ships, Drake also sports the most annoying power in the game, Tsunami, dealing 1 HP of global damage to all enemy units on the map. Tsunami is very annoying to go up against in this challenge since it increases the likelihood that one of my units will get picked off, and thus forcing a reset. Drake also has another very annoying passive power that is not listed in his dossier, but alluded to in the campaign's dialogue, and that is that he increases the chance for rain to occur in random weather, and his units also ignore its movement costs. Due to this, all of Drake's maps are fought with random weather on, meaning there's a high likelihood of rain to occur, but also snow, adding an element of unpredictability to these missions that is really not needed. For this map, we need to capture 15 properties before Drake does, and due to him having more properties on his side of the map, as is the usual with these missions, it essentially means that these 2 central properties are the loss condition. If Drake captures either of them, it's a GG. Trying to tackle this mission the normal way goes about as poorly as I had thought. I initially tried to move my naval units south and capture the central island, but Drake has an absolutely massive starting armada, consisting of 4 battleships and 2 submarines and cruisers. And that's just his naval units. His land forces are even more scary, sporting multiple indirects and medium tanks charging straight at us, though luckily they have to go through a rather huge forest to reach the northern island, giving me a fighting chance. I quickly learned learned that trying to do this mission conventionally is just not possible. Drake has too many battleships, and due to the fog, it's impossible for me to tell where they are. And this is made worse by the fact that the AI cheats and doesn't need vision to shoot on my troops. So after resetting several times, I get a different idea. I remember seeing that this map can be cleared with an HQ cap. I'm just not sure if it's possible deathless. You see, due to the AI capturing a forward base and harbor on this map and not having a massive income, Drake tends to ignore his two main bases around his HQ, leaving the area around it empty. And there's a convenient forest tile near his HQ where I can drop off an infantry unseen. I therefore load up a lander with a bait APC and an infantry and move my entire armada north, while dropping off a skeleton crew on the mainland to try and stall Drake's advance for as long as possible. I fail several times dealing with Drake's initial naval units. I have to kill his cruiser and submarine very quickly, and then I have to deal with his two moving battleships, which is not an easy task. But after several attempts, I finally get a try where I'm able to do all three, and thus I'm able to sneak my lander towards his HQ and unload my infantry along with an APC. The APC is necessary since Drake has a stationary battleship hidden in the reefs, and I need to ensure it doesn't destroy my 9 HP lander that's been damaged by a tsunami. And since the APC is on full health due to being sheltered, it survives a single hit, allowing my infantry to sneak into a secondary forest tile right next to Drake's HQ, while I evacuate my APC and lander back to a reef. Meanwhile, Drake's units are starting to arrive on the northern part of the island, and I'm wondering if I can hold them off for long enough. With my heart beating furiously in my chests, I activate double time with Sami and pray that Drake does not have any units around his HQ. And my heart sinks as I see my infantry being targeted by a battleship. But to my amazement, that's the only unit capable of attacking me. And since I'm Sami, with extra defense and increased capture speed, the attack is not enough to interrupt the HQ cap. Baffled that this insane strategy actually worked, I show off my unit's loss tab before capturing the HQ, claiming my victory. I have no idea how I was able to get through this mission this way, but I'm just grateful it's over with, because I was worried this was going to be a soft lock. Mission 16, Naval Clash, Sami Edition, is another one of those maps I remember being very difficult to S-rank. It's a route or seize HQ mission with the added caveat of a game over if you lose either of your two landers, but that doesn't really change anything for me in this challenge. This map is Fog of War, and Drake has a lot of indirects hidden in both woods and reefs. He has a battleship and a submarine to the east, which is important to lure closer, and he also has a cruiser to the west, but that won't move towards you unless you keep your submarine undived, since it won't have anything to target otherwise. To the east, Drake also has a battleship and a submarine, but they are stationary, so you can go ahead and ignore them. His island is very well defended, however, with 2 rockets and medium tanks, so entering it is going to require a lot of caution. I start off this map by moving my units to the west to draw in Drake's battleship, and then I place a bait APC in a city while positioning my rockets in the woods. Drake's battleship will be busy targeting my APC while I destroy it back with my rocket, and since the AI stupidly tends to unsubmerge its submarines right in front of hostile naval units, taking out that is no problem at all. Tsunami is as always very annoying, but I can ignore most of the damage by sheltering my units inside my landers and having the rest be repaired on my own properties before I move on to Drake's island. I decide to make my landing on the tiny strip of land south of Drake's HQ, as it will allow me to set up a welcoming party in preparation for his units. To my surprise, Drake actually only charges me with a handful of units while the rest of them remain stationary, so it's easier getting a foothold on his island than I initially thought. But the problems arrive once I get closer to his HQ. His rockets won't budge, and there's a stationary medium tank guarding it, so I'm at a bit of a loss as to how I should advance here, so I kinda just move my units forward and hope for the best. I time my attack horribly as Drake's second tsunami is ready, and I am 100% sure I am actually going to lose a unit here. But to my absolute surprise, I don't. However, on the second turn, most of my units are so damaged that I legit can't even take out Drake's rocket. In desperation, I pop double time and go for an HQ cap, and I expect my infantry to get wiped out. But for the third time, to my utter bewilderment, Drake is not even able to interrupt it, as he only has a single healthy rocket left. And thus, on day 14, with no losses, I capture his HQ to score my victory. I'm not sure if my strategy was just good or if I got incredibly lucky. Probably the latter. Mission 17, Wings of Victory, is one of those maps I was dreading going into this challenge, especially since I have to play as Sami if I want to unlock rivals, and Sami's not very good against Eagle. This is another pre-deployed Fog of War battle, and if you thought Sami's debut was bad, you've seen nothing yet. Eagle has a whole swarm of fighters and bombers charging straight at you, including a huge ground army which will take some time to arrive, but will arrive nonetheless. If you don't deal with his air units before the vehicles charge into your base, you are dead. Luckily, not all of Eagle's air units will charge at once, but the ones that do still pose a huge problem. Eagle bombers are almost impossible to tank, and there's not a single unit in the game that can take 2 of them and live, not even a medium tank on an HQ. I quickly learned that even trying to capture the 2 cities near my HQ is suicidal, so I pull all my forces back and curl them into a defensive ball formation, hoping to weather the storm. There's no 2 ways about it. This map is just trial and error. There's no way for me to really know what's coming, so I just mix my formations around countless times until I'm finally able to survive day 3. But then comes the next problem. Now I gotta deal with his air units, so he doesn't kill me when the lightning strike comes. And it will come, no matter what I do. This is another tedious trial and error segment where I just reset countless times trying to find out the most optimal sequence of moves. In the end, I'm able to find a formation that lets me spread out his attacks among several units, and it involves me putting my fighters in front as a shield. On the next turn, I'm able to shoot down most of Eagle's air units, and then I just have to put my units in such a way that Eagle will discover my APC in the woods before lightning strike and attack it afterwards. This allows me to spread out his firepower in such a way that none of my units die. And now I've survived Act 1. Act 2 is a lot more tedious. It involves simply waiting for Eagle's huge land army to arrive, and I set up a defensive perimeter with my medium tank and rocket to greet them. Due to all the forest tiles on this map, Eagle's vehicles take forever to get here, but when they do arrive, I have to be super careful. In the end though, I am able to deal with most of Eagle's vehicles, and even at this point, I decide to play it safe and press end turn until Eagle's last 3 aircraft crash due to fuel exhaustion. And at this point, I think all he has left is a missile hidden in the woods, so I transport a single mech towards his HQ, pop my double time, and go for the cap. Even if Eagle had a medium tank guarding the HQ at this point, it still wouldn't be enough. So at long lasts, on day 39, with no losses, I capped that HQ to win my Wings of Victory. This map certainly was tricky, but it actually wasn't as bad as I had feared. In every Advanced Wars challenge I do, there's always maps I think are going to be way harder than they actually end up being, but similarly, there are also maps I think are going to be easy that ends up being very challenging. Mission 18 Battle Mystery Sami Edition is one of those maps. Normally, this is one of the easiest missions in the Advanced campaign. All you need to do is to defend your infantry unit for 8 days, which is super simple to do since the AI doesn't really know how to scout for it, and it's even a free S rank to boot. But in this challenge, I don't just have to keep the infantry alive, I have to keep every single unit alive, and that turns this normally simple defense mission into one of the hardest I've faced so far. Drake has a whole armada coming my way, most of them charging from the get-go, and he outnumbers me 3-1. His land units aren't a big deal since I'll never cross the sea to my main island, but just dealing with his ships proves to be a very tough challenge. Evacuating the infantry unit isn't that challenging. All I have to do is move them north, eat a hit from Drake's anti-air before getting them out with a T-copter, which I can then store in a cruiser. The real challenge is trying to keep my naval units alive against Drake's relentless assaults. I reset this map many times over because it's actually pretty easy to forget where his cruisers are and they keep shooting down my battlecopters from the fog. But the biggest problem by far are his battleships. They are very likely to focus fire any unit within their range, so the first thing I have to do is get them separated and then bait them into attacking my units individually on properties. And doing it this way keeps the battleships focused on them, preventing them from joining up with the rest of the naval assaults. Once I've locked down his battleships, all I have to do is deal with the huge swarm of cruisers and submarines coming my way. I decide to just pull my armada back all the way, but this map isn't big and confrontation is inevitable, especially considering Drake's naval units are faster than mine. Luckily, I start with 2 battlecopters in the north, and once they link up with the rest of my navy, I get the idea to focus fire Drake's cruisers. If I eliminate his anti-air capabilities, it's pretty easy for my copters to block his subs from killing my landers. Yeah, it's pretty silly that subs can't dive underneath air units in this game, but that's just one of its many limitations. And after pressing end turn repeatedly, I finally arrive at at day 7 where I show off my 0 losses before I press end turn, wait for Drake to do nothing, and then win. Easy peasy, thanks for the free S rank. At this point, I have done everything I need to do to unlock rivals. After this, there will be no turning back. God save me. Mission 19, Andy times 2, is when we discover that Andy has been cloned, and thus we have to go up against him. Luckily, the clone is still Andy, and therefore kinda sucks, so at least we don't have to deal with any strong CO abilities or powers. Eagle helps us out here with a few AI-controlled fighters and bombers, and obviously there's no way for me to prevent him from taking losses, but luckily allied units are not treated as a loss, so it doesn't matter. It's nice that Eagle's units are here, but the issue is that their behavior is kinda random, and depending on where he chooses to attack, the mission can vary wildly. You'll see what I mean in a bit. I picked Sami for this mission since the best way to win here is via an HQ cap, and we need her extra capture rate and fast transport movement to reach Clone Andy's HQ in time. Despite going up against a pretty big army, we don't start with a lot of units here, and we have to make do with the ones we got. Furthermore, there's a huge problem. We begin with a T-copter, but no anti-air, and Clone Andy has a whole ton of fighters. Eagle will shoot some of them down, but not all of them, meaning that eventually they're gonna come gunning for my T-copter. This means that the only way to keep it alive is to surround it with 3 infantry units, which means most of my ground army is occupied. At sea, I also have to deal with Clone Andy's submarine and battleships, and I have to do this while trying to get my lander past them towards the enemy HQ. Andy's sub will usually dive on its first turn and then unsubmerge on the second if it doesn't have anything to attack, so by positioning my units correctly, I can take it out on day 3. Initially, things appear to be going alright, and I'm able to reach Clone Andy's HQ, but because Eagle had previously decided to dart over the island to take out some fighters there, they have dragged Clone Andy's anti-air all the way over to his HQ, which means it's in range to interrupt my capture. And considering the enemy is now starting to show up at my HQ, it's no longer possible for me to win, and I have to reset. On my second try, I do much better. Eagle's units finally decide to behave, and I'm able to get my lander to the HQ much faster by moving it inside the enemy battleship's minimum range. In fact, I play so much better this time that I genuinely think I might be able to rout Clone Andy if I keep playing. But I'm worried that my submarine is eventually going to sink since I don't have an APC. So instead, I unload my infantry, pop double time for the defense boost, and go for the HQ cap. Clone Andy's battleship shoots at me, but it doesn't matter since I'm Sami. And on day 8, with no losses, I take the HQ to score myself a victory. We're almost at the end now. Mission 20, Enigma, is where we meet the big bad guy of Advanced Wars, the enigmatic Sturm. This is a fog of war battle that usually takes quite a long time to complete, seeing as Sturm starts out with a huge army in his main base, and he also has the economy to spam more. The terrain on this map is very heavy, with lots of mountains and forest tiles, and this is very much by design, because Sturm's CO powers are very overpowered. They're hidden from the player, but this is how he works. All of his units are able to cross any terrain at the same cost. This makes Sturm very tricky to go up against in a deathless challenge, since his units are just so incredibly mobile. Furthermore, his units have a 30% day-to-day bonus to their firepower, but they do suffer minus 20% defense. Oh my god. This day-to-day power is actually pretty bad, as you might expect, but in a deathless run, it's one of the most terrifying things to go up against. Luckily for us, Sturm can't use his CO power in this battle. We're gonna have to wait until the final battle for that. My favorite CO to pick to go up against Sturm is of course Max. His 50% increased firepower combined with Sturm's 20% reduced defense is just so much fun, as it means pretty much everything is a one-shot. As is the case with pretty much everything in Advanced Wars, the best defense is a good offense, and Max has by far the best offense. This map starts off very rough. Sturm has many scary units rushing straight for me, including a bomber and a fighter, but luckily he has no airports, so once I deal with his initial air units, that's all I'm really going to face, as Sturm is unlikely to capture the neutral airport on the northern island. I reset several times dealing with Sturm's initial charge, but after a few attempts I find a way to tackle his first assault to deathless, and at this point I notice that this map has a crucial flaw. All of Sturm's army has to funnel itself through this solitary choke point at the bridge. Once I shoot down his air units, he is no longer able to cross the river except for with infantry, so I do what any sensible Max player would do in this situation. I build a lot of rockets. Turns out it doesn't really matter much having weak indirects when your enemy has to funnel their entire army through a single narrow choke point and have reduced defense to boot. Slowly but surely, I accrue a critical amount of Sigmax rockets while I capture the northern airport and build up a massive air force of bombers and battlecopters. My plan is to charge Sturm with overwhelming numbers and wipe him out in one massive push. Since there's really nothing urging me forward, I take my time and continue building up my forces. However, there is a problem with the strategy. For some weird reason, Sturm is hard-coded to build a lot of anti-air. In fact, his AI seems to want to have a minimum of 6 of them at the map at any given time. Just look how many of them are charging through here. This is worrisome as it means Sturm's anti-air defenses will be on point, and his base is covered in forest, making them very hard to spot. Therefore, I decide to combine my air assault with a land assault, so my tanks can clear a path through Sturm's anti-air. After a very long prep phase where I basically just build up a huge army, I finally decide to lay down the hammer and pop my max force, and with my army of tanks, bombers and battlecopters, I rush into Sturm's base to pick off as many units as I can. The attack goes well, but not as well as I had hoped, as there's still a lot of Sturm's unit left by the time I'm done. And as I end my turn, I grit my teeth expecting an anti-air to come charging out from the woods, but to my amazement, nothing shows up and my bombers are safe. On day 26, with 0 losses, I destroy Sturm's final APC to score a victory. And you know what's weird? I still get an S rank. For some reason, this mission is just insanely lenient with its rankings, a rarity in the advanced campaign. At long lasts, it is time for the map I've been dreading ever since I started this challenge, the final battle against Sturm. This map is infamous for its difficulty in the advanced campaign, and as a young teenager I remember being stuck on it an entire summer before finally beating it. This map is very unique, as the COs you get depend on the choices you made over the course of the campaign. Andy will always take center stage, but the leftmost CO can be either Max, Grit, or Olaf, while the rightmost CO can be either Sami, Drake, Eagle, or Kanbei. The leftmost CO I got is Grit, and I'm very happy with this, as his indirects are ideal for a deathless challenge. However, the rightmost CO is Eagle. This is far from optimal. I ideally wanted Kanbei in this slot, as his defenses would have been amazing for a challenge such as this. However, since I am going to try rivals, I have to go the Eagle route, which means I am stuck with him as my CO in this mission. It's not that Eagle is a bad CO or anything, in fact he's quite great, but have a look at Sturm's starting army. There are fighters and anti-air everywhere. Furthermore, Campaign Sturm still possesses his rather anti-air-centric playstyle. The AI is hard-coded to build a lot of anti-air and missiles in this mission, meaning Sturm's anti-air defenses will always be on point. One thing is for sure, this will be the toughest challenge I've yet to face. To add even more difficulty to the mission, Sturm is now allowed to use his CO power, Meteor Strike. Knowing how this power works is key to winning this mission. Meteor Strike is a very expensive power, costing 50,000 funds. However, when Sturm is up against 3 COs, this power will fill up fast. When this power is activated, a huge meteor will strike a 3x3 area of the screen, dealing 8 HP of damage to all units in its path. The meteor cannot kill units, but it will severely weaken them, making them easy target for Sturm's other units. The meteor is not random, it generally tries to do as much damage as it can in a single strike, but there are 3 different behaviors for it that are randomly generated each time the power is used. The meteor can either try to do as much value damage as possible, I call this the value meteor, or it can focus indirect units, I call this the indirect meteor, or it can simply try to do as much HP damage as it can without any regard for the costs, I call this the HP meteor. The absolute best way to draw the meteor away from the center of the battle is to form a 3x3 ball consisting of a lot of rockets and artillery. This means that 2 out of the 3 meteors are very likely to land here, but there's still some randomness involved. The meteor isn't just scary because of the damage it deals, however. It also boosts Sturm's firepower up to a massive plus 50%, making his units as scary as Max's direct combat units. This combined with their perfect movement means I'm in for a real tough challenge. And so, determined to not fail after coming this far, I start the mission. The first few days of this map is just me experimenting. I tried to get a feel for how Sturm moves his initial units, and I'm glad to see that his AI is hyper-aggressive. This means that he will move almost all of his units as far as possible towards mine, with no regard for their safety. This is good as it allows me to set up my units for a perfect counterattack. I played the first 2 or 3 days of this map several times just to get an opening strategy, but the difficulty of this map is simply overwhelming. Sturm simply has too many units, and they're just too fast. And even though I'm easily able to draw the first meteor down to Grit's HQ, Andy quickly finds himself completely overwhelmed by Sturm's medium tank brigade. I find that I don't even have the time to capture the neutral base near my HQ. Sturm arrives too fast and starts one-shotting my units, so I instead come up with an alternate strategy. I decide to retreat all of Andy's units south to try and form a defensive wall. But this too fails as Sturm just barges into my HQ area with his medium tanks, anti-air, and bombers. And it's just not possible to keep my units alive. Sturm's firepower is simply too high, and after several failed attempts, I start to wonder if this is actually impossible with Eagle as my right-hand CO. If I had Kanbei, I could have at the very least attempted to draw some of Sturm's army east and choke them between the mountains, relying on Kanbei's superior defenses to hold out. But with Eagle, all I really have to work with are bombers and fighters. Sturm does have a lot of anti-air as well as fighters, which makes Eagle pretty much worthless in the early stages of this battle. But what if I tried to exclusively target those units and those alone? So on day 1, I set up all my indirect units, mainly my missiles, to shoot down as many of Sturm's fighters as I can. I then form a wall with Andy in the center of the map, and on the right flank I move Eagle's fighters into position. And then, with a lightning strike charged up with Eagle, I put my plan into action. I charge in with my fighters and bombers, dealing as much damage to Sturm's anti-air and missiles as I can, and then I pop Lightning Strike to form a wall above Andy's units. Since I only have so many fighters and bombers, I do have to use some battlecopters for this wall as well, so it's absolutely essential that Sturm's meteor do not target them, as 2 HP battlecopters are still likely to be picked off by Sturm's tanks. After countless resets, I finally come up with a formation that will draw Sturm's meteor exclusively to my fighters and bombers, who are left damaged. But since the battlecopters are healthy, Sturm is not able to kill them. At this point, I have survived his initial assault, but what follows is no less difficult. I have to make sure to eliminate any reinforcement anti-air Sturm sends my way, as they threaten to kill off my wall of fighters and bombers, which are the only thing keeping Andy's units from dying. Andy isn't even able to deploy anything in his bases because Sturm has so many medium tanks, so any I would deploy would just be instantly destroyed. It seems incredibly bleak for a while, but luckily, Grit arrives to save the day. With a bunch of rockets and artillery on the other side of the mountain and a timely snipe attack, I am able to use him to eliminate all the anti-air charging down towards my HQ. I've also left the western airport under Sturm's control, as the AI foolishly continues to build fighters and bombers in it, which means I can kill them every turn with my Grit missiles. This strategy deprives Sturm of around 20,000 funds each turn, which greatly eases the pressure of units he's able to send down into Andy's base. But this alone is not enough to make me stop sweating, because Sturm still has a sizable army. He even takes one of Andy's bases and starts producing units in it, meaning I have to be very careful with how I proceed. Here's a fun little fact. It turns out that the reduced fuel cost on Eagle's air units actually ended up being crucial for this strategy to work. You see, Eagle is unable to get his APC down to the wall, which means that the fighters and bombers have to hover around there for quite a while. If it wasn't for the fact that Eagle spends less fuel, those units would have crashed. So shout out to this often underappreciated aspect of Eagle's day-to-day. It ended up saving the mission. At long last, Sturm is starting to yield, and I begin building up a critical mass of bombers, fighters, and battlecopters with Eagle. And after what feels like an eternity, it is finally time for the final push into Sturm's base. I charge in with bombers and destroy as many units as I can, and then activate Lightning Strike to finish off the job. So just to prove that this mission was indeed done deathless, here are Orange Star's losses, here are Blue Moon's losses, and finally, here are Green Earth's losses. And on day 27, I shoot down Sturm's final bomber to score my victory. This was easily the hardest map I've done so far in this Deathless challenge. The amount of thinking I had to do each turn cannot even be put into words. If I posted the entire try, the video would be over 3 hours long. In the end, I get a B rank, and I'm not done here. There's still one mission left, and for all I know, it might be impossible. Ladies and gentlemen, it's finally time for the ultimate challenge of this deathless run. It's time for Rivals. If you don't know the insanity of this mission, then consider yourself lucky. Rivals is a mission that is so infamous for its horrendous design and difficulty that it's gone down in history as one of the most brutal Advanced Wars maps of all time. It's difficult enough on normal mode. In the Advanced campaign, it's just cruel. You practically start with no units. The map is fog of war, and Eagle has a massive air force coming your way. Just take a look at what he starts out with. This is just not fair. Simply beating Rivals on its own is hard enough. Doing it deathless might just be impossible. Eagle will arrive in your base with battlecopters as early as day 3, and by day 5 he will swarm you with 4 bombers at once, and shortly after you will get attacked from both the north and south side by tanks and anti-air, all while having next to no income, and get this, not a single forest tile to hide your units in. Yeah, there are no forests on this map. I seriously believe that this mission was made as a cruel joke by the developers, and that's exactly what it feels like to play. I retried the first 3 to 4 days of this mission over 20 times just to get an initial feel for how Eagle moves his air units, and to my horror, I realized that there's actually quite a bit of RNG involved in how he moves them around. Sometimes they come bunched up together, other times they spread out. It's not going to be as simple as just memorizing the patterns. I need to also be lucky. Sometimes Eagle will appear from out of the fog and just kill one of my units, and there's nothing I can do to predict where it's going to happen or where the unit will come from since it's fog of war, and most of Eagle's air units have more movement than any of my units have vision, so it's a complete chance game. I am literally just rolling the dice. The main strategy for Rivals lies in making the AI choke up its units in the north and south side, and that will keep you safe from Eagle's ground forces. But that's not really the problem here. The air units are the main hazard. Primarily the 4 initial bombers. They come out from the fog and just blast the area around my HQ, and there isn't really any good way to tackle them deathless. I attempt this mission countless times, trying to find a good opener, and while I am able to find one that consistently stops Eagle's push in the north, his other tank comes in from the south at the most inconvenient time, forcing me to block it from a road, which makes it a prime target by his bombers. I try out alternate strategies, like saving up my funds and just deploying fighters, but this just makes Eagle's own fighters charge my base since they now got a target to attack, so that idea has to be scrapped as well. No matter what I do, I always seem to lose at least 1 unit, and Eagle's lightning strike hasn't even come in yet. I don't think there is a way to do this, guys. I'm sorry. But because I'm so incredibly stubborn, I decide to just keep trying the mission and see if there's anything I might have missed. And after about 30 attempts, something incredibly bizarre happens. Snow. It begins to snow on day 3. I have never before seen this occur on Rivals. According to all the online wikis I know, this mission is supposed to be fought with clear weather. And back when I did my Rivals stream, I never once saw any weather occur. But for whatever reason, on this attempt, snow started falling on day 3. I have no clue why this is happening, but I can swear to you guys, I did not tinker with this ROM in any way. The only explanation I can find is that I must have triggered some kind of rare glitch. Shocked to discover this new revelation, I attempt to recreate this error, and after resetting my game over 50 times, I was able to replicate it again. So now I know for sure that this wasn't just a one-off fluke. Something on this map has a rare chance of making snow appear. I don't know what. It isn't that the random weather setting is toggled on, because if that was the case, I should be seeing both rain and snow appear quite frequently over the course of my 50 resets, as random weather has around a 10% chance to occur. But for whatever reason, it appears I have discovered an unknown bug that is unique to Rivals alone. Maybe this bug has always been in the game, but never been discovered because it's so rare, and because people simply haven't played Rivals enough to learn about it. I tried googling it, and I could find nothing about it online. But this is actually a huge discovery, because if I can somehow make it snow early on, that will buy me valuable time, as it will slow down Eagle's initial bombers, making them appear in my base 1 turn later, which could be absolutely huge. And so, with renewed hope, I begin save scumming and resetting my turn over and over and over and over. After resetting maybe 100 times, I managed to make snow fall in such a way that the bombers appear like this. This is massive. This might actually work out. I attack the 4 bombers, bringing them all low, and then pop my hyper repair to heal up the retaliation damage and to boost my defense. And then I hold my breath until finally I get this attempt. After over 3 hours of playing Rivals and over 100 resets, I survive the first lightning strike without any losses. At this point, it does actually appear like this mission might be doable. I clean up the units around my HQ, and then I realize there's another problem. I have been playing Rivals as a defense mission, just trying to survive the first lightning strike. It now dawns on me that I actually have to beat Eagle by routing him or capturing his HQ. Routing probably isn't an option, as Eagle is probably close to hitting the unit cap at this point, but I get an idea that might just work. I fill up my base with missiles, shooting any bombers that appear and leaving APCs in front of them to attract their attention. And then, I simply wait. On both sides of my HQ, Eagle's land units are building up, and sooner or later, he will hit the unit cap of 50. And if I wait around even longer, his stationary fighters around his HQ will crash due to running out of fuel. If I can get Eagle to replace those crashed fighters with other air units, I might be able to build up a force of fighters and escort my T-copter towards his HQ, which should be empty since all of his units are trying to get over the bridge to my HQ. And thus, an incredibly slow build-up phase starts where I deploy a whole armada of fighters, a single bomber, and a T-copter with an infantry inside it. I have to be careful as he does have missiles on the islands, which is why I brought a single bomber to deal with them. And to my joy, I realized something very interesting about Eagle's AI. It appears that bombers have priority over his fighters when it comes to deployment. This means that he will deploy his bombers first, and since he's close to hitting the unit cap, that means as long as I target fire those bombers, he will just replace them with more bombers. And because he doesn't have the unit slots to build more fighters, he doesn't have any way to deal with my fighters. So slowly but surely, I make my way towards his HQ, unload my infantry, and to my relief, I find that the area around it is completely abandoned. Holding my breath, I activate Hyper Repair for the extra defense and send my infantry to capture his HQ. And to my horror, I realize that Eagle just got his lightning strike. He pops it, and I am fully expecting him to interrupt my cap with either a bomber or an anti-air. But, to my absolute joy, that doesn't happen. Then my heart stops for a moment as I see one of my fighters being targeted by a missile from the fog. But thanks to the combination of the extra defense from Hyper Repair and Eagle's attack penalty from Lightning Strike, the missile only deals 7 points of damage to the fighter. And then, his turn ends. I've done it, ladies and gentlemen. On day 47, with no losses, I capture Eagle's HQ to score my victory. There you have it. Rivals done deathless. So, ladies and gentlemen, I guess I can finally answer the question, can you beat Advanced Wars 1 without losing units? Yes you can, though it's not easy. Out of all the Deathless challenges I've attempted thus far, this is by far the hardest one. Though this wasn't very surprising to me, there's a reason I saved it for last. Now I have officially done Advanced Wars 1, Advanced Wars 2, Dual Strike, and Days of Ruin, the big four. If you watched them all, let me know in the comment section which one was your favorite. And as always, if you actually watched this entire video in one sitting, I'd love to hear which one of you did that as well. It's always fun to see who you are. Anyways guys, I completed the final big challenge in this series, and now I'm not quite sure what to do next. I suppose I could go back and try one of the older games, like Super Famicom Wars, but the older games don't really have viable campaigns, so I'm not sure how entertaining this would be. If you have any ideas of other challenges you'd like to see me try, please let me know about them in the comment section below. And as always, I would really appreciate a like and subscribe. My name is Mengs, thank you so much for watching, I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.